Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Northern Roses podcast with me, Henry North, a freelance journalist from Manchester, and Dr. Adam North. And in this episode, you're in for a treat because Adam wants to tell you about his run.
No, I don't want to tell you about my run. I want to tell you about what I saw on my run, which was on Monday afternoon. I was making my way back from Mayfield Park and I could see all the smoke on Oxford Road. So I think in the article, you can see the picture I took in the moment where you can see the haze from Whitworth Street. And basically there was a huge blaze going on at what we later found out to be the Hotspur press. And this was interesting because it came at a moment where we had previously released an article about what could make Manchester a better city to live in. How could we change and shape the spaces of this amazing city that we call home? How can we make it better, a better place to live? And so actually it came at an interesting time because the Hotspur Mill has been an area of contention for a while now. So developers have wanted to knock it down and build a big high-rise.
So do you just want to give a bit of background to what the Hotspur press is? Yeah,
so the Hotspur press is considered maybe one of the oldest mills in Manchester. Was previously a mill, became a press, so a printing press in I think the 19th century, and has been abandoned for quite some time now.
And it's important really to note here that a lot of folk, they have a level of sentimentality with the mill, don't they? Because a lot of people have a lot of pride with Manchester's industrial heritage. So it was, even though from before the blaze, the mill was quite run down and derelict, what it meant for a lot of people was more than that. It wasn't just some derelict mill. It was a symbol of Manchester's past.
Yeah, of the historical legacy of the city.
Yeah.
And it had a campaign, the Save the Hotspur Press campaign, and there have been various campaigns over the years to have the building listed and protect it because, you know, there is always a fine line within city development of how much of the old do you save and protect to keep that cultural and symbolic legacy, and how much do you make available for renovation and rejuvenation. And this is a fine line that plays out often in ways that are dissatisfactory for many of the locals.
It's like trying to keep the identity, isn't it?
Keeping the identity.
And it's especially relevant to Manchester, isn't it? Because we see around Castlefield these big glass skyscrapers getting thrown up and people don't really feel like it fits in with the city's identity. But the Hotspur Mill, a lot of people did feel like that was part of the city, the cultural heritage.
Yeah, with most of the, especially say like Ancoats, where you can see successful redevelopment of the old mills, whether you can be satisfied with who gets to live in them, because whether they're affordable to locals or whether the locals are then pushed out and you get just people who then move into, you know, rich people from elsewhere move into these developments and gentrify it. That's another question, but I think the actual redevelopment's been incredibly successful and it allows us to keep the legacy of the area and keep what many people I think would say are these beautiful buildings. And I think that's the same with the Hotspur Press, where it is a building that, although run down, it has that kind of beauty that we want to protect in our architecture. I think it was a case of we wanted to see this building retrofitted so that it keeps the look but is now available and can be lived in and is up to modern standards. So, you know, fixing fire escapes and drainage and all of these various things.
So fast forward to Monday, we have a fire.
Yeah, so on Monday...
You're on your own.
On Monday, I see the smoke. Yeah. You get back and can see the blaze from the flat. And this led me to kind of see online that straight away there are a range of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, because it's important to note here that the Hotspur Press, where it's situated, for those who aren't familiar with that exact part of Manchester, it's surrounded really by university accommodation, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in a desirable location. It's close to the city centre. It's near a range of bars. near First Street, near Bridgewater,
Oxford Road.
Street, Oxford Road train station, Bridgewater Hall. Society is not far away. Many really like desirable locations for drinking, eating, going to view arts events are nearby. So really desirable locations.
So naturally, it had attracted some attention from some developers, hadn't it?
So the government decided not to list the building, but they said there are certain restrictions in place for the developers. So they would have to keep some of the outer walls and some of the original signs. And I think this is known as facadism, where you keep some of the original, so that it looks like it's got this original look still, but all the inner bits are redeveloped, and there would be kind of a high-rise flats within or behind the original bits of the building. So you would have the nice look with the new, so it's old and new come together. I think this was quite satisfactory for the locals and for the developers, although not everyone is best pleased, because not everyone wants to see high rises go up. They just want to see the old building retrofitted and redeveloped, not the actual building itself knocked down and just the signage and outer walls kept. But anyway, so that agreement had been made, I think, pretty not that long ago. So that the developers were going to build a high-rise flat anyway.
So lo and behold, a fire breaks out at the Hotspur Press, and it's bad, isn't it? It totally engulfs the building.
Yeah, and as you can see in the pictures on the article, the entire inside's just burnt out. It's all gone now.
I'll have to admit, I did think coincidence here, that you've got something that was kind of standing in the way, because there were certain, I guess, pressure groups to maintain that the Hotspur Press was done in the right way, and then it's gone. So you think, oh, okay, something's happened here. The first thing you do, check the internet to see what everyone else is saying. Go on Reddit, and boom, the conspiracy mill starts rolling on, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I don't think at this point, we're not going to comment on what we think the most likely case is, because it could have been a case of arson. It could be commercial arson. But I think the problem is that this is what people instantly jump to. And I think that tells us something that I think was identified in the article from June 23rd. So from Satanic Mills to Joy Division, can Manchester reshape the spaces we call home? I think the very fact that people do feel disaffected from the process of development within Manchester, they feel like it's not connected to them. They don't feel like they have any part of it. And I think in many cases they feel suspicious of the people making these decisions and distrustful of local council, the developers around. All these things lead to people, I think, straight away. This is why we have this initial thought of this is some kind of nefarious arson to burn it down so that they don't have to maintain or keep any of the original parts of the building. When
in reality, it's summer now and the weather has been dryish but quite humid. It's reality that someone could have been squatting in there, smoked a cigarette and thrown it on, I don't know, a bit of kindling or some bit of wood that may have been lying around there.
Yeah, it's so easy to imagine it just being a technical problem. Like, this is such an old building, piece of stray wiring in extreme heat, which it has been over the past couple of weeks, created a fire. It's boring, but yeah, it's most likely. And maybe it was arson. I'm sure there'll be an investigation, but why would any building developer, and as we said, they already had the permissions they needed, why would they take a risk to commit a criminal offence? And I suppose people say, well, the investigation might be corrupt as well, and all of these various things, but it all stems from the same distrust and disconnection from local authorities, which I think is a massive issue, and I think maybe one that we're hoping to redress with local news, which is what we're trying to provide.
We talked a little bit there about people feeling disenfranchised with decision making within the city. So people feeling that the developers aren't working in their favour. And that's kind of what's led to this development, or this wanting to believe in conspiracy theories. We can see a similar pattern, can't we, within the politics at a national level? And that is where we wanted to go with this, because I was reading through our comments on a article that we did, Crown or Country, Why Britain Must Rethink the Monarchy. And we talked there about first past the post and proportional representation. And these are two different political systems. And one may lead to people feeling more disenfranchised than the other. Our current system is first past the post, and what that does is creates a winner or loser.
Yeah, it effectively means once you get over a certain proportion of the vote, you take all of the seats.
Yeah.
You take it all. So it's winner takes all, effectively. Whereas proportional representation, which I think we're both in favour of, is a system where actually you receive the amount of effectively power, the amount of seats equal to the number of votes you get. So let's say the Green Party receive 15% across the country in all constituents. Well, they should then get 15% of the seats available. Whereas, let's say Labour get 51%, which is, let's say that's enough to win the first past the post system. And they've done that in a number of constituencies. They will get a landslide, but that landslide would not be representative of an actual 51%. And I think proportional representation, which many European countries have, makes people feel like they have far more power in their vote and in their voice.
It's this idea, isn't it, that, I've felt it myself, that you can go to the voting booth and you have a pretty good idea that no matter what you put on that piece of paper, it's not going to influence the outcome. And that is the disenfranchisement that we would like to address here. And it's that feeling of kind of powerlessness, isn't it? That no matter what you do, it won't make a difference. And that is a dangerous topic, isn't it, really?
It is, because everything is connected to politics. Everything. So how good the facilities and structures that you live and work and enjoy your leisure time within are decided by politics and politicians. How the life that your child will have growing up is dictated by decisions made by politicians. Everything comes down to what politicians have done and the decisions they make. So to feel like you have no say in that is a massive failure. And that means in many ways democracy has failed you. And so what we need to be doing is encouraging people to feel political again. And I understand that for many people, if you feel that politics doesn't do anything for you, well, then you're not going to pay any attention to politics. But unfortunately, that's where people like Nigel Farage and other very right-wing politicians, that's where they thrive, because they know that they can feed off this idea of distrust, and they can say, oh, they're all corrupt. And then people go, well, they're all the same, but at least this one, at least I could go to the pub for a drink with. And this is kind of an attitude that I think a lot of people adopt. But unfortunately, that won't fix anything. And I think if we are all to take more of a interest in politics, then potentially we can change our local communities and then maybe the country for the better. But I recognise that the best way to do that is for politics to start giving people some results. And I think proportional representation means that every time you go out and vote, you know that you are actually having an impact. Whereas, let's say, first past the post, if you're in a constituency where the Conservatives or Labour always get 50 odd %, then you know that, well, what's the point of voting for a separate party, because they're never going to get enough to have a majority to get all of the power.
Yeah, and then that pattern, to then bring it back to the Hotspur press and the immediate jump to the conspiratorial theories, that might reflect this idea that the lack of transparency really in the decision making is that people think that there's this kind of puppet master behind the screen because they don't feel like they're ever included in decision-making processes.
Yeah, and also I think people tend to think that there's more control in how things are done. Like politics is this controlled system where decisions are always made consciously with lots of awareness.
But knowing the outcome of every decision.
I would ask people to really consider local politics, like look into it, because in many cases it's chaos. It's chaos, and decisions are made without much because really they're not paid, many of these roles. They're unpaid jobs or very low paid jobs. So the only people doing them are either really interested in helping their community, interested in having some power, or are doing it for reasons where they can improve their own agenda. So they might be wanting to influence the council to make decisions that help their business or help them in some way. So I think we have to really start to think about local government more and start thinking, not all of these decisions, there is not lots of control there. We have the technology capable now where we could know more about our local government. And at one point, that's what local papers did. They always informed locals about these things. But as we've discussed, local papers, local journalism, there's no money in that now because there's no state funding for it. And when there's no state funding, you rely on people to contribute. But because of social media, which doesn't pay any of these newspapers for the stories that they then steal and put on their platforms, it's so difficult. It's so difficult to get that information to people. And I think if you feel disaffected, it's on us really to say, how can we not feel that? How can we claim back some of that power that we feel like we've lost? And it's a lot to say when many people are working 9 to 5, tiring jobs, and you want to enjoy your leisure. And I completely understand that. But the problem is if we just all take that view, then things will just get worse and worse and worse. And really, if we were to push for better working conditions and better conditions throughout, I think it's possible to imagine that we could be working, most people could be working 4 days a week and having even more time to enjoy their lives and not worry about constant pressures that the cost of living crisis has pushed on people. But it's hard to think of that sacrifice in the short term for a much larger benefit. And whether you can motivate people to say we need to make these short-term sacrifices for long-term gain is one that it's a very hard case to make.
Yeah, so we kind of took a more structural outlook or analysis of the reaction to the Hotspur Press fire.
Yeah, because it's sad to see a fire on such an old building, but I think it is just that jumping to conspiracies that is an interesting phenomenon to consider, especially when it's just started. There's no evidence to go off, and I understand people instantly jumping to that, but it speaks a lot of our distrust. And trust itself it has to be earned. Trust shouldn't be given, especially to distrustful parties. But how can we start to rebuild that public trust? Because Nordic, Scandinavian countries have much higher trust in their politicians and their politics, and they have much better outcomes in their politics. Whereas countries that have lots of distrust in their politicians and politics have much worse outcomes. And I think the two go hand in hand, that if you distrust your politicians, it doesn't mean you're more likely to then pick a more trustworthy politician. It means you're just likely to then get more distrustful politicians. So I think we need to find a way to break this cycle and find ways to have more trust and faith that, say, like investigations over the Hotspur Press fire will give us the answers that we want, and we don't have to always be suspicious about dodgy developers or dodgy corrupt councils and things like that.
I guess time will reveal, I mean, maybe it won't, but hopefully we'll get to the bottom of what caused the fire, because it's one of those ones, isn't it? Whereas if no one had applied to build on it and there's a fire there, would anyone have suspected anyone of anything? But the developers did apply to build on there, and the fire did happen. So
I think there's always going to be these kind of rumours and suggestions, because in any city centre, if an old abandoned building that's contentious because people want it to keep it goes down in flames, there's always going to be questions asked. But I think in places where you trust your politicians and you trust your local institutions and your local authorities, we don't have to be so suspicious and angry all the time. I think if we can have a bit more trust, and that, again, like I said, that trust has to be gained through having trustworthy institutions and politicians. But if we can start to rebuild that trust, we could think, well, everything here is, we're going to find out what happened, and we're going to be able to make sure that the right outcomes are achieved. But I think what people think is, oh, it's gone down, and then there's going to be a flat there that doesn't have any of the old feeling of the Hotspur Press, and this was all for nothing, like the Save the Hotspur Press campaign, all for nothing. All this history gone, just being replaced by something new. And I think that it's a vision of the future where people think, well, all of this thing that made us or brought us to where we are is just going to be lost and forgotten. And I think we need to do more to rebuild a vision of where we want to go. And that, I think that's what the previous article discussed, is what vision of the future do we want Manchester to be? And I think that's one that we're yet to fully answer.
And it's not just a question of nostalgia. People looking back at fondly on the past really is our identity, isn't it? And I think for people in the north of England, it is the Industrial Revolution that really put us on the map. And I think that is really kind of the painful loss of the Hotspur Press there. So is there anything that you'd like to add?
Just to say that, yeah, I think you're right. It's a painful loss of something that attaches us to that history, and I don't think it is all nostalgia. Obviously, there's some nostalgia there, but I think in many ways it comes down to, you know, the vision of Manchester going forwards is one of skyscrapers and detached from local communities without the heart that many people feel Manchester has. And I think we have to try really hard to save that and drive forward for a city, not just one that copies London, but one that looks to cities around Europe that have done things right, like Amsterdam or Copenhagen or Helsinki, where people enjoy the spaces more, where children can play in the streets more and feel safe. Like I watched a video, the Simon Reeves documentary. He goes to Copenhagen and a woman's left her child out on the street in the pram, and he was saying, you know, if this was in America or England, you'd be arrested. And she would say, well, I always do this and never have to worry. And, you know, even now thinking about it, it is crazy that she was doing that, but then for her it wasn't crazy. And isn't that a mad thing, that she can live in a city where that isn't a crazy thing to do? I just think maybe we can start to think, how do we push for our city to also be like that? Yeah,
well, that's plenty of thinking to be doing there for you. That'll keep you busy.
Yeah, so I'll just recommend Simon Reeves, his documentary on Scandinavia and the Nordic countries on BBC.
Okay, well, thank you again for listening and supporting the Northern Rose podcast. We're getting a few subscribers now, so we are growing in numbers. Thank you very much, and we'll have a new podcast ready for you soon.
Should we?